We are creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective, moments in time captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
Hey guys, it's Darian Douglas. Welcome to the second season of the Working Artist Project. In fact, if you're back after the first season, welcome home. And if you're not, let me tell you a little bit about this podcast. I sit down with some of the most influential and talented artists from multiple fields, and we discuss the challenges of constructing a successful career as an artist. You will be inspired and motivated after listening to these amazing people conquer challenges and live life on their terms. Welcome to the Working Artist Project. So I want to welcome Kathleen Potton to the Working Artist Project. So I want to start by you just telling me your story, how you got from Australia to New York City. Why?
Okay.
Why are you here?
So I'm from a very small town in rural Australia.
Okay.
It's technically the country music capital of Australia. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of country music going on. But there's also some other amazing music and things going on there. So yeah, I grew up there, went to university in Sydney, Australia, and was always doing music. Wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do with music, but was just gravitating to anything, musical, like whether it was opera or whether it was jazz or anything, There's kind of so much stuff going on, but not in the same capacity as it is here in the States,
Right.
Yeah, and so I was studying music, and then I got an opportunity to study music in Singapore. I got a scholarship, so I was like, cool, let's go to Singapore, of all places. And then, of course, that was an opportunity to meet other people from all around the world, a lot of Americans there. Mm-hmm. And I think it was because of that I was like, maybe New York is an option as well. Because prior to that, it was like New York is like Sesame Street. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing to go to,
Right.
There's no way I could possibly move to New York. So I think making that next step across the globe to Singapore, I was like, okay, let's think about New York. So, and then after a few years in Singapore, it just got a bit too much and ended up somehow in New York.
Like you got too much from what standpoint?
So Singapore is an amazing place, but it's also kind of a little bit unreal. It's kind of a bit Disneyland-ish. I feel like it's a country that's trying so hard to be Western that they're kind of missing some real depth and quality in who they are musically, and just in the with a lot of things that are going on in the culture there. Met some amazing people there, great, beautiful people, but I felt like I needed something more that had a little bit more substance. And I had an opportunity to come to New York for a friend's 30th a few years ago, and as soon as I got here, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is real life, it's
right.
everything that I wanted. So yeah.
Oh, that's dope. So you're from the country music capital.
Yes. Yeah.
The other one.
Which
one is the real one?
Am I allowed to
you think Tamworth
full rank? I'm like, Tamworth is amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I watched the Dolly Parton concert that was in Tamworth. I had to make sure.
It was in Tamworth?
Yeah, because I had to make sure you weren't just bullshitting me. So I was like, all right, cool. Let me see. If Dolly Parton ain't been there, then it ain't real, but it's real.
She's been there? Well, yeah, I didn't see her, man. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so do you know, what's the history behind that? Do you know how that worked out, or?
No.
It just, people love country music there. I
don't know what happened. I remember when I was a kid, I'd see, back in the day, when it was just literally 2 blocks of the main street being closed off, and then have buskers every two stores with 3 strings on their guitar singing Slim Dusty, who's kind of our country music person in Australia.
Yeah.
And then it's just grown into becoming this massive thing. So Keith Urban's out there. They have country music awards, all that kind of thing. It's a whole big,
Now I got to check out some Australian country music. Everybody needs to check it out. I'm not really sure what it even sounds like. I mean, I'm sure it's country music, but it's got a different vibe because the culture's different, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is the same with all music, I think, in Australia. It ends up copying America anyway.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
But we definitely have some country music stars. There's a guy called Slim Dusty, who's kind of the guy,
He's
but
the guy.
yeah, can't say he influenced me musically, but you know, he's definitely
Right.
up there in country music world.
So, are your parents musicians or singers, or how did you you're the only one?
Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, they're very. They listen to a lot of music. Like, there's heaps of music going on in my house. They're very, very different though. Like, mum's classical background. She loves opera. She took me to operas when I was a kid. You know, that kind of thing. And also into like early swing music. So like Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And then my dad, who's English, so he grew up with the Beatles and Bob Dylan and Paul Simon, so he introduced me to that kind of music. So, yeah, that was kind of all the stuff that was going on.
Oh, that's dope. So you moved to Singapore to go to college.
Yeah.
Like, so I want to get into that. Like, what is it actually like to live in Singapore? Because, first of all, you're the only person I've ever met that actually lived there.
Really?
Most people just go there for vacation and, like, get crazy.
Right, okay.
You know? So I'm assuming it's like, I used to live in New Orleans, so I'm assuming it's like that.
Yeah, it's crazy
where
hot.
It's always, well, it's hot and it's always a party.
No, it's not always a party. Because it's very strict there. It's like super strict, you know.
Oh, word, okay.
Yeah. They've got like, it's always the place that's known for like having clean streets. You're not allowed to chew gum.
Oh, yeah.
All that kind of stuff. The food is ridiculously good though. Like super good. And you're so close to everywhere in Asia. You can just like pop over to, you know, Kuala Lumpur or go to Vietnam, Indonesia. It's amazing.
So did that culture seep into your music at all and your cooking abilities?
It seeped into my cooking abilities. I don't know, musically, because there's so many Americans living in Singapore as well. Like, one of my, like, I could say he's kind of like a mentor, but he's somebody who I respect a lot. He was actually out here in New York recently. He was playing with Eric Wyatt. He's a bass player, and he's kind of the sort of the godfather of jazz in Singapore. And, you know, he would like pull people aside and just give them like a little bit of advice. It was that kind of, I think, mentorship that doesn't really happen normally outside of America. So it was kind of cool to have that there. So I think musically that was the influence, like having somebody like him and then a bunch of other American artists that were there as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing I got from it.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And so you get to New York and are you like, oh shit, like what am I gonna do? Like, how do you chart a path when you get here? Well, first of all, you had to get a visa, right?
Yeah.
So what was that process difficult for you? I know a lot of people have.
Yeah.
So you have to pay lawyers. I don't really know, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was kind of lucky in that I'm Australian, so there's this kind of visa that's set up between America and Australia.
Okay.
That means if you get offered a job, then you get this. I think it's called the E3 visa. Okay. And it's a 2-year visa. It's just for Australians. I think it works the same for Americans going to Australia. It came out of the Iraq War. George Bush, John Howard, who's our Prime Minister at the time.
Okay.
They figured that out.
Deal. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the visa that I'm on. So it wasn't that hard, really.
So you had to get a day job in order to acquire this visa?
Kind of. I actually came here with my ex-husband at the time. He had the day job.
Life is real.
Yeah. So he had the real job and I came with him. So yeah. And so I was lucky in that I got to be the spouse of a E3 visa holder. So,
right. And you're still on that now from that. So you didn't have to go through like this whole, like some people have to do an artist visa, which is almost, it's different.
Oh, that's like a whole other thing. That's something that's, I looked into doing that, but it was just kind of like, there's too much work for something that's not really necessary for me. So, yeah.
So can you get are you able to get citizenship or after a while or do you even want that? Or you planning to go back to Australia? What's
I
that?
don't know. I would, I'm actually kind of really not sure. I'm sort of playing it year by year. I would look into getting a citizenship, but I'm not sure how easy that is to do. So it's, that's why it's kind of like, okay, every 2 years you renew your visa and I'll think about the big plan when that happens again. So I've got another year, I think, before I'm due for it.
So you're just chilling on it.
Yeah, take each day as it comes.
Right. That's cool. So is New York what you thought it would be, like in your imagination? Like, I know for me, like I'm from Mississippi, so coming to New York. Well, first of all, I came to New York once before I moved here for like a few days, and I was just like, I thought I was gonna live in the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, I just wasn't really aware of what living here was actually like. You know, what was it like for you?
It was a shock, because the first time we came, it was for a friend's 30th. We were like living at large. I'd saved some money. It was kind of, we had this loft in Soho where it had like a baby grand. There was like 20 of us staying in this loft. A bunch of musicians were there. It's like a jam night every night. I was like, cool, this is New York. Fantastic. Soho. Right. And then moving here, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm broke and I have to go back to waitressing tables kind of stuff, you know, like, whereas in Singapore it was like gigging regularly with good money, you know, that kind of thing. So it was kind of like an identity crisis, I think, when I first got here. But I'm actually been surprised at how much of a family vibe I've received in New York. Like, I thought it was going to be really harsh and people were going to be like, you know, pushing each other aside and competitive, and that certainly does exist to a certain extent. But I think the thing that I feel the most is having a community around me of musicians who are supportive and loving, and, you know, they've got each other's back.
Right.
That's the thing I was really surprised at, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think New York seems like this, you know, big bad place that's going to be tough, and it hasn't really been that for me.
So how did you manage to like to get into your zone? You mentioned you had to wait tables, and like so you had to humble yourself. Be like, okay, wait, I have this goal, and then I'm assuming you had to find your niche.
Yeah.
So how did you manage to do that?
It took a little while. I actually took a step back from music. I probably took like a year off from just gigging and everything, because I felt like moving to New York was quite hard. Like, out of all the countries I've moved to, this was definitely the toughest one.
New York, not the U.S., but just
New York. I don't know. I haven't lived in other cities in America. But yeah, I think, I went and did my master's at Queen's College, and I think that sort of got the ball rolling again. And I think because it's quite an open program in the master's there, it's not like, I think, Manhattan School and other places that got much more strict curriculum. Whereas I think for Queen's College, it was a lot more open. And so you had to, you know, figure out a lot of things for yourself. And I got a lot more into like writing my own material. And I think that was the thing that kind of made me feel a lot more connected to what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know?
So, man, it's kind of weird because you studied classical music initially, right? And then you just switched. When you came to New York, you were like, I'm going to study jazz. Was it just like a thing where I need to do something, or you wanted to study that for more? Why did you choose?
Well, I was doing jazz actually in Singapore. It was a jazz program. But my initial training was classical. And I think, again, it's that thing of growing up in Tamworth. It's like, you know, you want to be connected to something creative and musical, but you don't necessarily have the paths open to you. It's like you don't see the direction in front of you, so you're just kind of grabbing at everything. So, you know, classical, there was a conservatorium in Tamworth, so I did classical there. And then I get to Sydney and I hear, you know, jazz music that's amazing. I'm like, oh, jazz, I want to do that.
Right.
And then I get an opportunity to go to Singapore and study jazz. I'm like, cool, I'll do that. And then I think it was just because I hadn't seen how you could be a musician, like live out doing that in where I'd grown up from, that it took so long for me to kind of go, oh, this is what I want to do, you know?
Yeah. So how has the classical training benefited you? Because now you're doing like singer-songwriter more. Like, I don't know what do you call your music?
Yeah, I guess it's singer-songwriter.
Singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
It's like infused with all of these different influences, right? So how did it help, the classical training help you versus the jazz?
I mean, the technique stuff, obviously, like straight up. But it's, you know, and it's a different kind of way of hearing music. It's, I don't know, the way I approach, if I'm in a rut when I'm writing a song, like you can analyze it the same way you would classical music. I suppose you do that for jazz as well. You can see what the function is, like happening harmonically, or that kind of thing. So if I'm like writing a song, I'll be like, okay, well, this thing won't make sense because it's not going to resolve to this chord and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
So you can draw on that kind of thing. But I think just having your ears open to all kind of music is a really great thing, and classical